This video is sponsored by Synology, and the product I want to recommend is the Disk Station, which is a network-attached storage device. You can use it for storing files, streaming media, and much more. But what I really want to mention is the idea of using it as a development box like I do. You can install software like Apache servers, Git, Docker, content management systems like Drupal and WordPress, and much more. As you can see, the DSM software is just amazing. There's different Disk Station models that can hold different storage amounts, and they range in price. So I'll put a link in the description to the DS918 Plus, which is what I use, but I'll also put some others as well. So check out the links in the description below. Hey, what's going on, guys? So I have a front-end React project for you today. We're going to build a step form. Well, at least that's what I'm calling it. And you guys have seen this before, where you have a website or an application, you fill out part of a form, you click next or continue, you fill out another part, maybe another part, and then you can confirm the data that you entered and then submit it. And you should be able to go back and edit other parts of the form. Okay, so that's what we're going to be creating. We're going to use React with Material UI so that we can get this nice looking the nav bar and the fields here, the button, and basically I'll just give you a quick demo. So first name, last name, email, and we'll go ahead and click continue, and it brings us to personal details. Okay, now at any time I can go back and our data is still going to be there because it's being stored in the component state. Okay, basically the parent component state. So click continue. I'll fill this out, and oops, let's say bio. I'll just say this is my bio. I'm not going to do any validation or anything like that. If you guys want, you can do that. But I'll click continue, and then it's going to just show me a confirmation page with all the data I entered. Now, at this point, I can still go back. I can even go back to the first part, and the data is still going to be there. And we're not switching URLs or anything. This is all done within React components. Okay, each one of these is a component, and we have a piece of state that's going to decide which should show. So continue, and once we're done, we want to confirm and continue, and it brings us to this thank you, this success component. All right, now we're not going to do the back end where we submit to an API or anything like that. Maybe we can save that for another project. This is just going to be the front end. And obviously you can change the form up. Of course, the design, you can implement it into your own applications, your own projects. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so before we start to write our React code, I want to just give you a visualization of how this is going to be structured. So basically, all these blocks are React components. We have a user form component, which is basically the parent, okay, to all of these ones here. And this is going to hold the state. It's going to hold a step, which is going to be a number. It's going to be 1 by default. And obviously, it'll be like step 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it'll also hold all the fields. So we're going to have like first name, last name, email, all that stuff. Obviously, you can use different fields if you want. And then as far as methods, we have next step, which is going to bring us to the next one. It's just going to increment whatever the step is. Previous step will bring us to the one before it. And handle change is going to be when we start to enter data into the inputs and it edits the fields of the state. That's what handle change is going to do. Okay, so we have the user details as the first step, then personal details, the confirmation, and finally the success. Now, the confirmation, this is where you would normally do your calls to your back end so that you could actually submit the data to do something. But we're not going to do that. This is strictly front end. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that before we get started. Now, what I'm going to do, let's just open up a new tab here. And I have a folder called React Step Form. Okay, now if you're not really familiar with React, I have a course called React Front to Back on Udemy. It's like I think it's like a 9-hour course or something like that, maybe a little more, where I explain the basics of React and stuff like that. We build a couple little projects, so I'd highly recommend that if you don't know anything about React, because I'm not going to go over every little detail in this video. All right, and I'll put the link in the description for that. So let's go ahead and use npx. What this will do is it'll allow us to use create React app, which is the command line tool to create a React application, and it'll allow us to use it without actually installing it globally. So let's say create React app, and I'm just going to do dot because I want it to be generated in the current folder, this React step form folder. All right, guys, so now that that's done, before we start the dev server, I'm just going to install our dependency, which is material UI. So we're going to say npm install material-UI. And basically what this allows us to do is bring in material design components like buttons, lists, nav bars, things like that. We can bring them in and use them as React components. Okay, it's kind of like React Strap or React Bootstrap, only it's material design instead of Bootstrap. All right, so now we can run the server. Let's do npm start. Let's see. Oh, I'm already using that on a port. Oh, I didn't realize that. All right, so I'll just use it on 3001. Okay, so here we go. Here's our landing page. Obviously, this is the Create React app version 2.0 landing page. So what we're going to do is go into our source folder here, and we need to create a place for our components. So I'm going to create a folder called components, and we might as well just create all the files we're going to need. So one, we're going to need user form.js. That's going to be kind of the parent component. That's where we're going to decide which subcomponent to display. All right, let's create another one called form user details.js. Okay, so that'll be the user details. Then we'll create another one called form personal details.js. That'll be like the occupation, city, that stuff. And then let's create a confirm.js. Okay, so that'll be the confirmation. And let's create a success.js, which will be the success page, which will be really simple. All right, so we'll go to our user form.js. That's basically our wrapper, our parent component. And then we want to create a class-based component. Okay, so I'm using an extension in Visual Studio Code, which is this right here, ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native Snippets, which just gives you a bunch of handy snippets so you don't have to type everything out. So to create a class-based component, we can simply do RCE tab. Okay, and if you don't have the extension or you're not using VS Code, just go ahead and type this out. It even gives it the name user form because that's what we called the file, and that's what I want to call it. All right, now I think from here we want to create our state. Okay, so this component is going to have state attached to it. State is going to be an object, and this is where we want to put our step, which is going to be 1 by default. The rest of the state is just going to be the fields. So we're going to say like first name, which will be an empty string. Oops, empty string, and then let's do last name. Let's see, we're going to have a couple more. So first name, last name, let's do email. Let's do occupation. Let's do city. And let's do bio. Okay, so those are our fields, and that's our state. Now I think before we get into the rendering, we should create our next step and previous step methods. So this component's going to have a method to proceed to the next step. So let's say next step. We're going to use an arrow function. Okay, so we just want to go like that. And I'm going to take the step out of the state using destructuring. So we want to put some curly braces here and say step, and we're pulling that out of this dot state. Okay, we define the step in the state right here. We're just pulling it out, putting into a variable. It's called destructuring. And then we just want to set the state. So we can do this dot set state. Okay, and then whatever we want to change in the state, we want to put here as the key, which is the step, and we just want to increment it. So we're going to say step plus 1. All right, so that will bring us to the next step. Now I'm going to copy this because previous step is pretty much the same thing. We're going to say go back to previous step, and we're going to rename this prev step, except we just want to change the plus to a minus because we want to go back one. All right, and that's it. Now we want one more method, which is to handle these, we'll say handle fields change, okay, because each input will have its own state, our own piece of state, which would be this stuff here, and every time we edit an input, that stuff will change, and that's what this is going to do. So let's call it handle change, and it's going to take in input, and we're going to use an arrow. We're also going to have an event parameter attached to this, and another arrow, and then we want to set the state. So this dot set state, and we want to take whatever the input is, and we want to set it to whatever the value is, and we can get that using that event parameter and then using target.value. Okay, so whatever the value is, that'll be set, whether it's the first name, last name, email, whatever is entered, and that will handle all of the fields. Okay, so that's it for the methods. Now let's go down to the render, and what we want to do here is figure out what step we're on, and depending on which step we're on, that's going to decide which component we want to display. Okay, but we need to do a couple things before we deal with that. So first of all, I'm going to pull the step out of the state by destructuring, saying step equals this dot state. Okay, that'll pull that out. I also want to pull out all the fields. So for instance, we have first name, last name, email, occupation, city, and what else? Bio. Okay, we want to pull that stuff out of the state as well. Okay, I could have put step in here and got rid of this, but I think this is a little cleaner. Now I also want a variable called values, and values is just going to be just that, basically what I just did here. So I'm going to just grab all of this stuff and paste that in. That way we can pass the values into each component, okay, so that we can render those values in the inputs. So next thing we want to do is we're not going to just have one return, we're going to have a switch statement here. Alright, so let's say switch, and let's put in the step because that's what we're looking at. We want to make a case for, you know, each number. So let's say case 1. So if it's case 1, then we want to return, we want to return the form user details component. Remember, that's where it asks for your first name, last name, email. Now we haven't created that component yet or anything like that, so this will fail, but I'm just going to put it in and then we'll create it. So let's say form user details. Okay, and it's going to take in a couple props. When you add attributes to a component, those are props, and we need to do that because we need to access next step. We need to access well, not previous step in this particular one because there is no previous, but we also need to access handle change. The way that we do that is with props. So we're going to go ahead and say next step equals this dot next step, which will call this method right here and then increase the step or increment the step by 1. We also want to add handle change, and we want to set that equal to this dot handle change. Oops. Okay, and then the final thing we want to pass in as a prop is the values, so we'll just say equals values, and that's this stuff here. Alright, now I'm going to do the other cases, so let's go below this return and let's say case 2. Alright, now instead of returning the actual component, just for now I'm going to return an H1 with the name of the component, and we'll get to that later. I want to focus on the first one first, so we'll say form personal details. Alright, case 2. Let's do case 3, and we'll say return H1. It's not letting me do, let me just copy this. Oops, what the heck. Alright, so this is actually, case 3 is going to be the confirm. Okay, and then we need to tab this over. All right, so let's grab this and let's go ahead and copy that down, and this will be case 4. And case 4 is going to be the success. Okay, and then that's it. Those are all of our cases. Now, of course, if you wanted more steps and more, form parts, you could do that. You could create other components and you could do that. But this is good for now. This form user details we're going to bring in even though we haven't created it yet. So we're going to go up to the top here and let's say import form user details from, and that's just going to be in the same folder, and then form user details. Okay, so we'll save that. Now in our app.js, which is just like our entry point, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this logo. I'm going to get rid of everything. Let's see, let's get rid of everything that's inside this div with the class of app, so basically the header. That's this stuff here. And I just want to put in our user form component, okay, which I have to bring in. Oh, I already did, never mind. So we just want to display our user form component. So I'm going to save this, and we're going to get an error because check the render of user form, and it's because in our render of user form we're trying to render a component that doesn't exist yet, which is this form user details. Alright, so wait a minute, export default user form. Yeah, so yeah, it's saying that you forgot to export your component. We didn't even create the component. So let's go to form user details and let's create a class-based component. I'm going to do RCE tab. And just for now, let's just do like an H1 and we'll say hello just to make, whoops, don't want that. Double cursor, let's get rid of that. Alright, so we'll just say hello from user details just to make sure that it renders. So let's save that, and there we go. So we know that we're rendering form user details, okay, and that's correct because this is the first step. So let's see, we're going to be using material UI, so we need to bring in a few things. So first thing we're going to bring in is the MUI, the material UI theme provider, and that's basically a wrapper for everything that we're going to do, everything that we're going to include. So let's say import, actually we can do, with the extension I'm using, I can do IMP tab, and it'll just do this for us. And I'm going to change this to material UI, let's see, material dash UI slash styles slash MUI theme provider. Okay, so we want to bring that in, and then we're going to use the app bar, which is basically like a nav bar, just for looks. There's really no functionality to it. So I can do IMP tab, and this is going to come from material UI slash app bar. Okay, so let's see, next thing is going to be the text field, because each text field is going to be material UI component. So let's say material UI slash slash text field. All right, and then the last thing we want to bring in is raised button. So UI slash raised button, which is right here. Alright, so these are the things that we're going to use, and I need to change all these module names. So this first one will be MUI theme provider, this one will be app bar, this one text field, and this one raised button. So now in our class right here, we're going to have one method other than render, and that's going to be called continue. Okay, so we're going to say continue, and that'll take in an event parameter. We're going to use an arrow function. We want to prevent the default, so prevent default, and then we just want to call the next step function of where is it? In user form. So next step right here. Okay, so we're just going to say this dot props, because remember we passed it in as props, and we can call next step like that. Okay, so now let's get to our render. Now remember we passed in, let me just close this up. We'll close all these up except for the two we need. So in user form, when we rendered form user details, we passed in the values. Okay, so I'm going to go right above the return, and I'm going to use a little destructuring and just pull out those values from the props. Okay, because it's in the props, so we could access it with this dot props dot values, but by me doing this, I'm just pulling it out so that I can use values as a variable. All right, and then in the return, we actually want to wrap everything in that MUI theme provider like that instead of this div. Oops. So MUI theme provider. Now the theme provider, this has to have just one element. It's not like we can do like multiple text fields inside here. We have to put those inside a single element. We could use like a div, but I'm just going to use a React fragment, which is like a fake DOM element. So we'll just say react.fragment. Okay, whoops, I didn't want to do that. There we go. All right, so in this React fragment, in this theme provider, first thing I want is the app bar. So let's say app bar, and it takes in a title prop. Go like that. So title, I'm going to say enter user details, and let's save that, and there we go. We have our app bar. Okay, now we want our text fields. So remember we brought in text field as a component. So let's say text field. Okay, and this is going to take in a couple things. So one is going to be the hint text, and we're going to set that to just enter your first name. Okay, so that's our hint text, like the label. Then we have the floating label text. Let's see, floating label text, which will just be first name. Now, the way React works is every time the text field changes, like every time we type in it, it's going to fire off an event, or we want to fire off an event of on change, and we're going to have that call this dot props dot handle change. Actually, you know what we could do is just pull that out of props up here. So handle change, we'll pull that out, and then we don't have to do this dot props. Okay, so we'll say handle change, and the field is going to be first name, or the input. Remember, when we look at handle change up here, it takes in an input. It needs to know which field it's actually changing. Okay, and the way that we're able to call this is by passing passing in handle change as a prop here, and then calling the function up here. Okay, and then we're calling it from here. So that's our first text field. Now what I'll do, actually we want to do one more thing, and that's add a default value, because we want our text, whatever is entered, to stay there. So that's going to be values dot, and then whatever the field, which is first name in this case. Let me just save that. Okay, good. So I'm going to copy text field, and I'm just going to put a line break under it, and then paste that in. Let's do another line break and paste that in one more time. So the next one is going to be last name. So I'm just going to select these two and say last name, and then let's say handle change for last name, and values dot last name. All right, and then this one here is going to be the email. So we'll say enter your email. Okay, and let's get rid of that. Say email, and this will be email, and values dot email. Okay, so next thing we need is our button. So let's put another line break in here. And this is going to be the raised button that we brought in. So let's say raised button. And this is going to take in a couple things. So one is going to be the label, which is just the text that's displayed, and it's going to say continue. Because remember, this is the first step. I'm going to set primary. This has to do with the color display. I'm going to set that to true. That'll make it a blue color. I also want to add some margins, so I'm going to actually add a styles attribute. A style attribute, and I'm going to set this to, let's say, styles dot button. And then down here, under everything, I'm just going to create a variable called styles, and let's set that to some parentheses, and then we'll have a button style. All right, we'll just set margin to 15. Okay, and then the final thing we want is the actual, what happens when we click this. So we want an on-click event. We want to set that to this dot continue, okay, which we put above. And all continue does is call next step of user form, and we do that through props. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So let's save this, and let's just see what happens if we just enter something in here. I click continue, and it goes to form personal details, which is exactly what we want. And the reason it does that is because it calls next step, which brings it to step 2. And if we look at our switch, case 2 is just going to give us that H1. Okay, so that's what's going on. So the next thing we need to do is create this form personal details. So when we enter something in here, it should get added to the user form state. So what I'm going to do is open up our React tools. Let's see, let's move this stuff down, and let's go to React. All right, so I want to look at the user form state, and you can see first name has whatever I typed in. If I go to last name, type it in, email. So we know that every time we type something in here, it's getting added to the user form state, to this stuff up here, which is exactly what should be happening. All right, so now let's actually copy everything that's in form user details, and let's go to form personal details and paste that in. Okay, so this is just basically the same thing, just different fields. So we want to change the name of the component to personal details. Make sure you export it down here as form personal details. Let's see, we're going to have continue, but we also want a back method because we want to be able to go back to the user details. So I'm going to copy this, and let's change this to back, and try to if you're new and this is a little confusing, try to guess what we're going to do here. All right, if you want to take a second or pause it. If we go to user form, remember to go back a step, we have previous step, right, or prev step. So what we want to do is just simply call this .props.prev step. Now we haven't actually embedded this component here yet, which we're going to do, but when we do, we also have to put prev step in addition to next step. All right, I'm going to close up the user details for now. So let's go down here and handle the rest of this. So let's say enter personal details, and we have our occupation. So we'll say enter occupation, and on change occupation. Let's get rid of that. All right. So that's the occupation. Next we have what? The city. So enter your, let's do city, and oops. Oops, sorry guys. City. So this will be values.city here. All right. And then we have what? Bio. So enter your bio, bio. Why do I keep doing that? All right, so, and this will be values.bio. All right. Now, let's see. In addition to the continue button, which can stay the exact same, it's just going to call this .continue, which we have up here. We also want a back button. So let's copy the raised button, and let's put one right underneath, and let's set the label to back. And instead of this .continue, we're going to call this .back. And I'm also going to change the color, so I'm going to set primary to false, which will make it like a white. So we'll do that. We'll save that, and then we need to go back to user form, and we need to actually bring this in. So up top here, we want to bring in form personal details. And then down here, we want to embed it in case 2, right? Because it's the second step. So I'm going to copy this. Actually, we'll just copy the whole return and replace this. Okay, make sure this is tabbed over. And this is going to be form personal details. And like I said, in addition to next step, we need to have prev step. So let's grab that. We'll go ahead and copy that down. And change that to prev step. That way we can go back. We still want these two, and that should be good. So let's save. All right, now what I'm going to do is try this out. So if I say Brad Traversy test at test.com, let's say continue, brings us to the next step. Now if I go back, that data is still there because it's stored in the state of user form. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And if I start to type in here, let me just open up my React tools. Okay, and we'll look at user form because that's where the state is. And you can see that the initial stuff is there. We're on step 2. If I start to type in here, that stuff gets filled in. Okay, so to the user, it looks like we're going through different pages, you know, like different entire URLs, but we're not. We're just operating within, you know, the React components depending on what step we're on. So that should be good for that. Now the confirm, we're going to deal with that now. So let's see, we're going to just copy from the user details again. I'm just going to grab it all, go into confirm and paste that in. Now let's see, what do we need here? This is going to be a little different. We're going to use the app bar, the theme provider, raised button. We don't need text field, but what we do need is a list and a list item. So we'll say import list and list item, and it's going to be from material UI / list. Now down here, this continue, we're going to keep this here because we still want to go to the next step, which would be the success page. Now this is probably where you would process your form. And what I mean by that is send your data to your API, whatever that may be. It may be, you know, Express or I don't know, Flask or Python, PHP. It could be any kind of back-end language or framework. This is probably where you would do that, or at least have a method that would do that. But that's the back end. We're not dealing with that. Maybe we can add that in another video. Now down here, let's see, we want to pull out a bunch of stuff from props. We don't need handle change. Props actually, let's see, if we look at, actually we haven't even embedded it yet. So why don't we do that first? Let's replace this with the actual component. So we're going to bring in confirm up above here. So confirm from confirm, and then for case 3, let's go ahead and we're just gonna copy this return and paste that in. Now confirm is also going to have a previous step. One thing we don't need though is handle change because there's no inputs. We're not actually changing any fields in the state. So we just need next step and previous step. All right, and if I save that, we're just going to get an error here. Let's go to confirm, and it's just complaining about these text fields because we didn't actually bring in text field. That's all going to change. So I want to pull out all the values. Okay, remember values are in the props. So I'm going to, let's see. The way that we can do this is by saying const, let's say values, colon, and then whatever the values, so first name, email, occupation, city, and bio, and we're pulling that out of the props, okay, which is in values. So now we can just use these variables. So I'm going to get rid of, I'm going to keep the app bar, but I'm going to change it to confirm. Let's just say, we'll say confirm user data. And then we're going to get rid of all these text fields. We don't need those. Oops. Okay, keep the button, but we're going to get rid of the text fields. And now we want a list. Okay, so we just want to say list, and inside here what we want is a list item. Okay, now list item is going to have two things. The way that we're going to do this is it's going to have primary text, which is going to be the label. Oops, this should be an equals. This is going to be the label, which is going to be first name. Okay, and then we're going to have secondary text, which is going to be the, why do I keep doing that? This is going to be the actual data, which we're going to get from the variable of first name because we pulled that out of the values in the props up top. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this list item because we have one for each. So let's do, that's first name, last name, email, occupation, city, bio. Okay, then we're just going to change these up. So that's going to be last name, this one, email, okay, this one is going to be occupation, okay, what else? City, and bio. Okay, so those are our list items. Now as far as the continue button, let's actually change the label to confirm. We'll say confirm and continue. And that's going to call, let's see, yeah, that's going to call this dot continue, which we have up here. Now we also want a back button. So I'm going to copy that from the personal details because there is a back button there. So I'm going to just grab that and go back to confirm and paste that right underneath. That's going to call this dot back, which we actually don't have. So I'm going to copy that from the personal details as well. So we'll grab that. Because if we're looking at the confirm page and there's an error in something we typed, we want to be able to go back. And I think that should do it. So let's save this and let's try it out. So continue, we can go back, see our data, continue, occupation, let's say hello, and continue. Handle change is not a function. Okay, so hold on a second here. It's talking about this. Handle change is not a function. Did we not pass it in? So handle change, this dot handle change. Huh. Oh, I have form personal details twice, and notice this one doesn't have the handle change. So it's looking at this one. This should actually be confirm. That's the issue here. Okay, so let's try this again. We'll save that, and I'll just put anything. All right, so if I go continue, good. So it brings us to confirm. It has all of our data. I should be able to go back again. I can change the data if I want. Continue, and now you see Brad. Good. So far so good. So now case 4 is going to be the success, which is going to be very simple. Let's just bring that in. We'll create it in a second, but let's bring it in. So this will be success, and then down here in case 4, we want to load success, and it's actually not even going to have any props, so we can just simply say return success like that. It's just going to be basically a static page. So let's go to success.js, and I'm still going to use the material theme, so I will copy, let's just copy confirm, I guess, and paste that in. We're going to change, we're actually going to get rid of everything except the app bar and the theme provider, and of course React, and change this to success. Make sure we change the export to success. We're not going to need this. There's no buttons. We're going to get rid of everything that's in the React fragment except for the app bar. Okay, so the app bar title, let's just say success, and then we'll just simply put an H1, and we'll say thank you for your submission, and we'll do a paragraph, and we'll say you will get an email with further instructions. Okay, so just a simple success page, and we should be good. So let's try it out. Okay, continue. So this is all of our data that we've added. Confirm and continue. Cannot read property first name of undefined, and that's because I left this here. We didn't pass values in because there's no need to. So let's just try it again with just real quick. Continue, confirm, and there we go. So there's a success component. All right, guys, so that is it. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and hopefully you can use it in some of your projects where you want to have, multi-tiered forms or whatever, multi-step forms. You see it quite a bit in websites. So that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like this, please leave it a like. And again, I do have a React front to back course if you're interested, and I'll put that link in the description below. So I just want to do a quick shout out to one of my most loyal patrons, Carlos Mafla, who has his own YouTube channel actually, where he creates videos on different web development topics such as JavaScript, React, Git, some DevOps stuff. Really interesting channel, so check him out. I'll put a link in the description below, as well as a link to my Patreon if you want to read more about that and become a patron.